welcome to Legacy Contracts' first webinar. Our webinar is titled Structure Accountability, Designing a Law Firm That Doesn't Require Constant Intervention. The runtime is roughly 45 minutes. We're going to go through a couple of slides and then have Q&A questions at the end. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Please remember to stay on mute until the end, and then we'll open up the floor to have questions and any concerns or things that you want to talk about, anything else of that matter. So we are going to get started. So we're going to do the introduction, basic house rules, content, and Q&A. So my name is Courtney. I own Legacy Contracts. I've owned the company for 5 years now. I have 13 years of experience working in law firms. I'm an operational partner to any size law firms or solo attorneys. I founded the company in 2025, and as of right now, I'm the author of 5 new ebooks and counting. I have a plan to release at least 3 to 4 ebooks per year. They are available on Amazon on our website. What we're going to cover today is why law firms stall, even when the work is good, what decision gravity is, and what is costing your firm, the structure that replaces constant intervention, where to start with restructuring your firm, and then your next steps after that. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about is the shift. If your firm needs you in every decision, it's not a running law firm. It's basically just being managed from moment to moment. It's being carried by one person, which is you, whether you're the founder, you're the operational partner, or the managing partner. Every decision finds itself rerouting itself back to you. So basically that's not scalable. The cost of that arrangement, it compounds literally every single day. And I really want you to kind of take a step back and hear this because it's not a capacity problem. Your law firm, the way that it's operating and you yourself, you're not doing too much because you're not capable of letting go, delegating, or whatever. You could be handling and doing too much because the structure of your firm never really told anyone where decisions belong. And that's not like a leadership failure, that's mainly a structural issue. Um, and luckily enough, structural gaps are fixable here. So when we look at this, we're going to actually see what it looks like inside of your firm with, patterns, practical steps, things of that nature. So this could look like a couple of different things. And I want you to notice if any of these feel familiar to yourself, if you see them operating on a day-to-day basis, or just any practical steps or practical examples of what this looks like inside of your firm. So pattern one is anybody who has just really quick questions, and they may not be an issue every single day. They may not even be, things that recur on a consistent basis, but they do come up and they do interrupt whatever you're doing at whatever point in time of your day. And it may not even be strategic questions. It could be really small operational ones that anybody could answer. If it's like, hey, quick question, do we take this client, or do we handle this from this lead? Or if a question is client called in about their invoice and they, had this that they wanted to run by you, or a quick question, who handles this or whatever else happens. So that's pattern one. Pattern two is repeated approvals for things that should have been delegated months ago. You've approved it, you've looked over it more times than you can count, and it's still coming back to you for your review. Pattern three is work that's pausing mid-matter while someone else waits for your confirmation. And it's not because it's legally complex, but it's because no one else has permission to move that thing to wherever it is it needs to go next. And then pattern four is you becoming the initial default answer. And it's not because you're the best person to answer it. It may not even be within your field of what you want to answer, but it comes back to you on a consistent basis because no one else has been named to be the person to answer whatever issue it is. So if one or two of these you can recognize are coming up in your firm, then this session is for you. So why does this happen? And we're going to look at 3 root causes, and luckily enough, they are all structural. So the these basic things are pretty specific, mainly because generic advice, doesn't fix these honed in root causes. So if you can recognize these within your firm, great. If not, we still have information for you today. So root cause number one is no one defined ownership. Authority exists in titles, which means she's the office manager, he's HR, she does the receptionist responsibilities, but it's not documented. They're not named in any kind of structure. Most firms do not have some type of like manual that you can reference. It's kind of just built in. Hey, she's the receptionist, so she takes anything within that realm of just what you would generically think that a receptionist would handle. So when decisions arise, everyone assumes that somebody else handles it, and then it ends up floating upward back to the managing partner or the founder of the law firm. So if you would assume that, the receptionist would handle client intake, but you have an intake person for that, or you have a paralegal or legal assistant that could or could not handle that, no one really knows who does what, who handles what, because it's not concrete. Everybody has assumptions of who should be doing what and to what extent. And because no one's clear on that, it floats right back up the leadership, hierarchy. So root cause number two is you have decisions without, excuse me, you have delegation without authority. And this one is pretty subtle because what generally happens is that you hand off a task and you assign an action. Do this for this person, move on, call it a day. But you never explicitly transfer the decision making authority. So what that means, what that looks like is that person, they do the work, they check that off, the task box, and they move on. But if that delegation continues to come up and if they still run back to you to review it or to check their overall work or whatever else have you, that's your key sign to know that all you did was delegate the labor, but you kept the same authority. So that's pretty much just outsourcing. It's not necessarily delegation. And a lot of attorneys and firm owners kind of miss this step and recognize that, hey, I gave you this task. Why are you still asking me about this? It could look like if you have invoices that go out every single month and you have, your invoices tend to be around a particular number. And so you've given that task to another person to say, hey, these invoices, they're all reviewed. Please go ahead and send them out. And they're recognizing that, okay, these clients tend to have these invoices that are around this number. But one month in particular, that client's invoice could be, a couple $1,000 because they do not have the authority to still feel empowered to make the decision to send out that invoice, it keeps coming back to you. And they'll keep saying, hey, I know you said to send these out, but this person's invoice is a little different, or, it's a little higher than what it's normally been. Do I still have permission to send these out? And it could be things that compound like that over time, where it's like, I gave you this task. Why are you not, doing it? It's because all you did was outsource the responsibility, but you never handed over the authority to still be able to complete and handle that task with the confidence that I have this, ownership over it. So that is root cause number two. It's still outsourcing your workload, but it's keeping that weight that comes with it. So root cause number three is that your systems are built around people and not around processes. So your firm functions because of who's present and not because of how it's designed. So if you remove one person or if they're sick, they're, on vacation, on their leave, whatever, including yourself, then everything that you've built around these particular people, once they're out of the office for whatever reason, everything will stop. And that is not a resilient law firm. That's a law firm that's being held together by availability of specific individuals. So if you even come across, people who are really good at their job and you have nothing that's documented, the second they go on vacation or the second that they call out and everything is on pause until they come back into office, that's not anything that's scalable and that's not a law firm that's structured for growth. So these are the three root causes. Luckily enough, all of them are structural, and none of them require any new staff, no new technology, no money, or no new money to fix it. They just require intentional design. So because these are, consistent, these are repetitive, with this, we've coined the term of calling what these three root causes are decision gravity. And we're going to next explain what that means. So, decision gravity is the basic phenomenon that explains why your inbox may be too full or why you're making decisions on things that should be given to another person. And here at Legacy, we define it as such. It's when authority is unclear, they settle at the highest point of perceived control. And this making this concrete for how you can apply it in your firm is that there are basically three mechanisms that really make this happen. Number one is a checkpoint, which means that nothing moves until you review it, give clarity on it or whatever. And it doesn't mean that you are the bottleneck for the choices being made or what needs to happen in your firm, but it's because no one else outside of you has permission to move whatever they're asking you to review. So if it's the invoices that we were talking about, no one has permission to move those until you go back and review or give your final permission. If it's these that are coming in before they even get a consultation, they're staying within that, pending place until you go back and review it. You've basically made yourself the green light that is halting every single process of your firm. And if nothing moves until you review it, that is part of the decision gravity. Number two is the escalation point, where every unresolved question finds itself rooting right back to you, where your team, is constantly asking you different things, or clients are coming back to you with, repetitive, consistent questions. And this doesn't mean that they are incapable. This doesn't mean that they don't do a good job or they don't know what they're doing. It pretty much just means that they are asking because the system of how you've structured your law firm gives them no other option. There's no documented answer, there's no resources available, there's no named authority. So each question climbs its way up of whatever hierarchy status you have established in your firm until it reaches someone who has that perceived power to resolve it, which 9 times out of 10 means either you as a managing partner or you as the founder of the firm. And the last thing is called the fallback. And this is where no one knows what to do so that they go back and they ask you. And it's not because, you are the end all be all, but it's mainly because you have made yourself the most available person who will answer that question. And when you constantly make yourself available, you are training your law firm to default itself to you, not to any documented answers, not to any other resources you could have established, not even to any other person in your firm. It all comes back to you. And we've seen this a lot with people who try to do things very quickly and they try to, do it under the guise of, we're just helping out, and I want to make sure we get you the answers that we need, which is great, in hindsight. But you're constantly training other people in your law firm to come back to you because you get them those results. And that is not any kind of structure that, would operate with intentional systems. Its default becomes you. So these are the three mechanisms. All of them come back to one particular source, which is unclear authority. And they have the same destination. Every single time it is your office desk. And whether that's virtual or in person, is coming back to your desk. So with this, we're going to then talk about what this is costing your firm, because not only is this just inconvenient, it gets to be very expensive. So we're really going to put a real cost on this, because one of the reasons why managing partners, they don't fix this sooner is that because the cost can seem like it's invisible. It doesn't always show up as a line item. You can't put this on your invoice, but it shows up as friction, which can look like, the four things that we've named here. It can look like slower response times where the clients are constantly waiting on matters that sit in somebody's queue because you have to review certain things, or you've got to, make sure that you get them the answers that they need. The firm then, because of that wait time, looks less reliable than it is. And it's not because of the legal work, it's because of the approval structure that is halted by different people, and whether that's yourself or others, that have to review certain things before it actually gets back to the client. This can also look like delayed billing cycles where approvals, they're top slow every single process. Invoices move too slow. people putting in, the time entries, expenses, getting the receipts, all of these things are delaying the initial process. And that means that in retrospect, you have that earned revenue that's still sitting uncollected because it's waiting for a specific checkpoint. And 9 times out of 10, it's either you or somebody else that you delegated the task to, but initially it comes back to you for that final review. The third thing is un underused team capacity, where you have staff who are more than capable of doing and completing different tasks, different objectives, getting you to different growth stages, and they want to do more. 9 times out of 10, you have a lot of staff who are being underused, and they want to also develop their skill sets and things that could help them grow within their role as well. And they sit idle, they wait for your direction, they wait for that delegation, they wait for that outsource. And a lot of times that direction really can only come when you're available. And because 9 times out of 10, attorneys have a lot more to do than to be able to, properly observe without any structure their team members, that ends up being capacity that you are paying for because it's not working for you. So a lot of structures, with this could mean quarterly or yearly reviews. That could mean, asking team members, hey, we're hiring for this particular position, but do you have any additional skill sets that you could bring to the team that we may not be aware of that we could utilize you for? And it's just creating those structures, whether that's during the hiring process or your yearly reviews, quarterly reviews, whatever else have you, to be able to ensure that you're not underusing them and costing your firm in the long run. And the last one is leadership fatigue. And this is one that a lot of people feel. There are a lot of reportings and statistics on a yearly review. I know Clio does a lot of it, which reports on attorney burnout. And this is something that compounds literally every single year, especially taking a hike during the pandemic. And this can mean a multitude of different things, but to kind of sum it all up for what we're talking about today, you are handling decisions that are meant for other people all day, every day. And it could look like, the strategic work, the thinking, the growth, the vision, the mindset, all of these different things could look like and be utilized in different areas, in different areas, or even, just different ways, excuse me, um, for losing out to operational noise. And the trade-off for this is not sustainability, or the trade-off is not sustainable and it's not necessary. So what does the alternative look like? What does structural accountability actually look like? And how can you apply it in your law firm? So we have a couple different ways that you could place it to where it actually belongs. Structural accountability is the design principle that answers every single one of those problems that we named previously, and it's built on 3 different elements. Every decision in your firm has a defined owner, one person, and you name them. They don't have to be named by title. They don't have to have assumed proximity. You just name them. The second is a clear path for the decisions being made, which means you're documenting that. You either putting that in some kind of handbook or you're just typing out, training instructions, modules, whatever, but it needs to be made so that people can see what happens next and who handles it. And this isn't just like some, Slack message that you send out. It's not just an email that you're putting out to like, hey, we're doing this. It's some kind of memo that people can see and they can reference back that doesn't live in either people's memories or it's not dependent on those people being in office to know what they're supposed to do next. And then every decision has a place where it belongs. It's not in your Outlook inbox. It's not, you know, sitting on some kind of paper on somebody's desk. It belongs somewhere specifically. So if you have like a Google Drive that your office uses, or if you have some kind of CRM and you have a specific folder for trainings, or a folder that is dedicated to certain people's positions, you're putting it in a place where everybody has access to and everybody knows where it is. So when these 3 things are in place, you have, people who are named as owners of specific tasks or roles. You have a clear path of what happens next and who handles it, and you have to find a place of where everything goes then your decisions will stop climbing. They stop finding their way back to your desk. They resolve at the level that they belong in. And then you, as the managing partner or the founding partner, is then freed up to do what you should be doing within your specific role. So, looking at that, most firms have very specific structural failure points that prevent this from working. So, we're going to dive into next of where they tend to break. So there are 3 points that we have named here. There's a lot more that goes into this, but for the sake of time for right now, I want to get into three. So 3 places where firms break structurally are the decision ownership gaps, workflow ambiguity, and the lack of documentation. And these are important because knowing where it breaks gives you the insight to where you need to fix it. Decision ownership gaps is mainly that no one is formally named. They're not named as the decision maker for reoccurring questions. They're not named as the person handling invoices or anything else have you. So this results in everyone else waiting for someone else to handle it. And that quote unquote everyone eventually will mean you. Workflow ambiguity means that your processes exist, but and you may have a certain way, to get things done. If you have to come in and you have like a workflow that's set out, that's all named. But the authority for those processes is what's missing. So it's partially documented or it may even be fully documented, but the people who are named over those tasks and those things that need to happen are what's missing. So that tends to have everything, falling apart where you could say, hey, a lead calls in and then they're scheduled for uh, a consultation. And then after the consultation, they're sent out the initial agreement. Then after the agreement, they're sent out the invoice if you collect invoices up front. And then, after that, they have a client workflow. That's all, or like a client welcoming, like letter or meeting or however else you take it after they become an initial client. That is all documented, but no one owns that specific workflow. And what that means is that that will find its way back up into your desk. And that's, where those things tend to fall apart, where it's like, hey, we have a document. It's like, yeah, you do, but you're missing who handles that. So now everybody's taking a guess. Everybody's just kind of sitting there like, are you doing that part? Do I do that part? Like, does he do that part? Like, if those things are missing, and that's where, it continues to crumble. Then you have your lack of documentation, where what we were talking about before, where like the systems they live in people's memories or they live in your inbox. So no one knows where to go, no one knows what to reference. And for whatever reason, if those people who have those documented systems, if they're in a meeting or if they're on vacation, if they're out sick, your entire system will pause. And that then makes you, the managing partner or founder, the initial default. People then come back to you and say, hey, Courtney's out of office. She normally handles this. Who do you like? Who does this go to in her absence? Or who needs to pick up on this? And that's another instance where all of your systems will pause yet again. So these 3 failure points, they are pretty much the bulk of the reasons why the 4 patterns that we referenced before, they continually show up. And it doesn't matter how many times you try to address them individually, how many times you try to, sit down and have office meetings where you're going through these things and you're delegating it. If these main issues and points are not taken care of, those patterns that we talked about previously will continue to repeat. So with naming these, we're going to talk about where you can start from, not anything too huge, not anything too crazy, but just 4 points, 4 moves that you can make this week to kind of get you on that path to intentionally creating your law firm structure. So these are the 4 points I'm going to get into, or moves that you can, get into. Move number one is you identify within your firm 3 decisions that continually return to you. Just 3 things or 3 quick questions, that people constantly have for you that you recognize are coming up more times than it should. It doesn't have to be really big ones, it doesn't have to be operational ones. It could just be, hey, quick question. Are we, are we open on court holidays? Or are we closed? Do we have different hours? Whatever. Memorial Day is coming up, so that could be a thing where people, want to know if they have off, or if they just have different hours, if they can, take off and still work remotely, all those different things. So these questions that come up, you could be finding yourself repeating those answers in your sleep. Write those three questions down. If you have a pen, you can do it now. If you want to revert to or refer to this later, by all means. Um, Number two is, why do those decisions require an answer from you specifically? For each of those things, whether it's your hours of operation or who handles specific tasks or anything, any inconsistencies with billing, why do those questions keep getting rerouted to you and not to other people? And answer that honestly. It could be you are the person that gives them the faster response. You're the person that, kind of has that authority over it, or you could just be the person that trained them. They may just feel comfortable with asking you questions instead of other people. But, whatever comes up to you, write that answer down and note whether it is because it requires your actual expertise to answer those questions, or it's just because no one else has taken authority over answering those specific questions. Move number three is you are clarifying your ownership, not just of one task, but the authority over the whole process. And if you need to assign different tasks because, authority may be too heavy for certain things, by all means, but just clearly defining who has authority and over what. And the difference between assigning something to somebody and being authorized to do so may weigh differently depending on what it is, but just making sure that you are defining that. If you are assigning a task delegation to somebody specifically, or if you're just outsourcing it for them to handle it as it comes up, that needs to be clearly defined so that your team knows what to do with both. If you're just giving somebody to do, the invoices for this month because you're overwhelmed or whatever, that needs to be clearly named versus if you're giving them that authority and the permission to handle that from here on out as part of the job description, that also needs to be named. So that's move number three. Move number four is document what repeats so that it does not depend on memory. Writing it down in training modules, putting in some kind of handbook, or even just, creating some kind of Google Drive and putting this all out on paper so that people can reference it later takes that decision making power off of you. It's putting it, into a form, it's writing it in a specific process. And this does not mean that you don't trust your team to handle different things. This also doesn't mean that, you don't have the right authority in your firm to go over it, but it pretty much is protecting your process with any circumstance changes. If somebody leaves the firm, if somebody goes on a really lengthy vacation, even like some kind of maternity leave, this is protecting your firm and your firm's process and structures with whatever may come. Even if the world goes through another pandemic, you have everything in place to be able to shift and navigate the world accordingly. So these are, four moves. They don't require, a whole meeting or like a sit down. It's just, four different things that could require, maybe an hour or two of just giving your attention and your intentions on how you want things to look in the firm, what needs to change, and how you can navigate that accordingly. So next we're going to talk about what you'll notice when you put these things, into place and when you make the actual changes. So when your law firm structure carries the work of your firm, you are then freed up as whatever leadership role that you have to then lead your firm. And this could look like you have faster execution times. Things move without waiting for permission or approval or review. Your decisions resolve at a level that they belong in. Your matters progress without sitting in your queue, your inbox, and it overall just has faster escalation. Or faster execution, excuse me. Then you have fewer escalations where your structure of the firm absorbs the noise that comes from undocumented things or gaps within your system. So the questions that used to come back to your desk have now been documented and they sit in like a Google Drive or something. Your team doesn't stop asking those questions because they're afraid to, or, they don't want to get the repercussions or, kind of get the runaround, but they stop asking questions because they already have a place or person to reference those answers from. So you're creating that process, you're putting it down in some kind of paper form or in your system or whatever, and that gives your team a better direction than to just either assume or take a wild guess. This also then leads into stronger team confidence, where your team is then acting within the authority that they've been given. They stop waiting for permission that you've already, dubbed them for, and your law firm then gets faster and more capable at the same time. So, the instance that we were talking about before, where certain team members may or may not know if they have permission to send out those invoices, once you give them that proper authority and that permission, they take and run with it. And then they also become the person where if they have, clients who come back with questions or whatever else have you, they feel more empowered to be able to navigate what that actual authority over that task, over that position actually means, and they feel more empowered to be able to handle and do what they need to do. So all of this, or I guess the last one as well, is then you would have stable law firm operations where the firm will function regardless of who's present. So if you take a vacation, if you are out sick, anybody else, on the leadership chain the same way, your firm will not it won't put a pause in it. And you will also not be bombarded with constant messages while you're on vacation or while you're out sick or whatever else have you of just, hey, can I do this? Or hey, who does this? Or hey, what do I need to do with that? Not everyone in your law firm is replaceable. A lot of these processes and things, or even, just what makes your team a really good team is not replaceable, but it also does not have to live within that member themselves. It could be put into a design, it could be put into your processes, it could be created within a stable operational law firm. And the intentions of this is to make sure that your design of your firm is not dependent upon any one person's availability. You should be able to freely come in and out of your firm to whatever extent that you allow for without being worried about if this person decides one day that they either want to leave and pursue, different opportunities, or if they want to go on a simple vacation, they should not be freaking out. How your firm operates from here on out is not dependent on one person's availability. So that's pretty much what, the structural accountability looks like. It's not based on, just efficiency, but it is stable, it's confidence, and it means freedom. So what we're going to talk about next is your awareness of it, because that's not enough. Being aware of these issues or these, things to think about, the decisions to make is not enough, to just be aware of it. So we're going to be very direct about that and, look at the shift that you need to take to be able to kind of, bring the whole thing full circle. So most law firms, they don't see the problem, and few actually take the initiative to redesign their structures. Most managing partners that I speak to really describe decision gravity perfectly, before I even name it, because they can see it, they can feel it, but it's still invisible to them. Awareness, is not enough for them to be able to take that next step. Knowing something is broken is not the same thing as taking the steps to redesigning it. So, the firms that move in that constant intervention cycle, structural stability is not, the thing that they're looking at. They do the work, every single day. They name the gaps that are coming up in their firm on a consistent basis. They are, taking steps and looking at what needs to be written down and what needs to, be assigned to other people. The work within itself is not complicated, but it is very specific. And it moves much faster when you have a framework and or a partner who's, continually done it before. So, if describing this feels familiar to you, you do have an offer that you want to bring up at the conclusion of this assessment. And lastly, you want to close out this webinar by stating that your firm should move and grow because of its design, and it not solely rely on your consistent presence within the law firm. And if you listen to nothing else that I've said today, that particular sentence it encapsulates this entire webinar within that one line. You don't need to do more. You need a structure that carries the work for you. Over the last 13 years, the managing partners that, I've worked with who've made this shift and been able to like intentionally design their law firm, they didn't become less invested. They didn't just decide, hey, you know what, this is working out for me. I really don't need to care about this firm to the same extent. No, if anything, they've had more free time to continually invest in where it matters within the strategy of your law firm, the relationships you want to build for your firm, and just the legal work that they have taken the time, effort, and energy to continually build to handle this. And I want to really reiterate that the structure of your law firm is not a replacement for your leadership. I know a lot of people get pretty nervous where it's like, if I fix this, then, who am I or what is my role then within the company? Creating an intentional structure for your firm is not a replacement for your leadership as the managing partner, the founder, any of the leadership roles. It's not a replacement. It is what makes your leadership possible within your firm. So, I just want to really reiterate that because a lot of people do tend to get nervous about that. But that is the conclusion of our very first webinar. I do want to thank you all for being here today. This was not a light topic. It's not something that, people think about handling. You get pretty busy with the legal work. And so I do want to say thank you for giving this your time and your full attention. Really appreciate that. Since first webinar, I was pretty nervous about it. So I do really appreciate everybody's taking the time to, be patient with me and sit and listen. So we're going to open up the floor for Q&A. If you have anything in the chat box, we are going to review that. And we do also want to make a quick note before we stop the recording so that you guys can ask your questions. Is we do have a resources page on our website that is filled with, we have our blog posts, we have articles, we have, free tools and resources pretty much around what we discussed today. So if you would prefer to, dive into that, if you would like to do your own research first, by all means. But we are going to put a pause on the recordings and open up the floor for questions.